Natalie Wood was born Natalia Nikolaevna Zakharenko on July 20th, 1938, in San Francisco, to Russian immigrant parents whose lives were shaped by sacrifice and ambition. From the beginning, her mother believed Natalie was destined for stardom and guided her relentlessly toward that goal. Long before Natalie understood what fame meant, she was already learning how to perform, how to please, and how to meet expectations. She appeared on film sets before she could read and made her screen debut at just 4 years old. Directors quickly noticed her emotional sensitivity, an ability to convey feeling far beyond her years. Audiences adored her in Miracle on 34th Street, and Hollywood embraced her as a gifted child star. Yet behind the applause, Natalie was absorbing a powerful lesson early on. Approval and achievement were deeply intertwined, and success was never optional. Growing up under the camera's gaze. Unlike many child actors whose careers faded, Natalie Wood navigated adolescence with determination and discipline. As she grew older, she worked carefully to avoid being trapped by her childhood image. She wanted roles that carried emotional weight, not just surface charm. That transition came powerfully with Rebel Without a Cause, where she starred opposite James Dean and earned her first Academy Award nomination. Her performance revealed vulnerability, conflict, and emotional realism that audiences found unforgettable. Throughout the late 1950s and early 1960s, Natalie became one of Hollywood's most respected young actresses. Films like Splendour in the Grass and West Side Story showcased her range and maturity. Even when her singing was dubbed, her presence carried scenes effortlessly. By her mid-20s, she had achieved something rare. She was both commercially successful and artistically admired. Fame and the weight of expectation. Despite her success, Natalie Wood lived with emotional pressure few people saw. Growing up in the public eye shaped her sense of identity in complicated ways. Hollywood celebrated her beauty and talent while quietly reinforcing rigid expectations about behavior, image, and femininity. Natalie was admired everywhere she went, yet privately struggled with anxiety and self-doubt. Friends later described her as thoughtful, intelligent, and deeply sensitive, someone who felt emotions intensely but guarded them carefully. She longed for stability and belonging, even as she maintained a polished public image. Fame gave her opportunities, but it also demanded constant performance beyond the screen. Natalie often found herself torn between independence and the desire for lasting emotional safety. While she navigated premieres and praise with elegance, she quietly carried the cost of growing up in an industry that rewarded perfection more than emotional well-being. Love in the public eye. Natalie Wood's romantic life unfolded under constant public scrutiny, beginning with her relationship with actor Robert Wagner. Their marriage in 1957 was celebrated as a Hollywood fairy tale, but behind the scenes, youth and pressure strained the relationship. They divorced a few years later, not in scandal, but in emotional exhaustion. In the years that followed, Natalie sought connection through other relationships, each reflecting her hope for stability and understanding. In 1969, she married British producer Richard Gregson and became a mother, experiencing a period of calm and fulfillment. Yet that marriage also ended, reinforcing a pattern of longing followed by disappointment. When Natalie reunited with Wagner later, the relationship was rooted in maturity rather than fantasy. Their second marriage reflected shared history, responsibility, and a quieter understanding of love shaped by experience rather than idealism. Redefining success through motherhood. By the early 1970s, Natalie Wood began to redefine what fulfillment meant to her. Motherhood brought her a sense of purpose that fame never fully satisfied. She deliberately slowed her career, choosing roles selectively and prioritizing family life. This shift was not a retreat, but a conscious decision to regain control over her narrative. Friends recalled that Natalie treasured ordinary moments, finding joy in routines that grounded her beyond Hollywood. She remained respected in the industry, even as she stepped away from constant visibility. Her later performances reflected deeper emotional maturity shaped by lived experience. While tabloids continued to speculate, Natalie focused on building stability for her children. For the first time, her life felt balanced between personal meaning and professional identity. It was during this quieter chapter, when she seemed most at peace, that tragedy arrived without warning. A night that left questions behind. In November 1981, Natalie Wood traveled to Catalina Island aboard a yacht for what was meant to be a brief and relaxing trip with her husband and colleagues. By the following morning, she was gone. The news shocked the world, and disbelief spread quickly. Initial reports described an accidental drowning, yet unanswered questions emerged almost immediately. Natalie was known to be cautious around water, which made the explanation difficult for many to accept. Conflicting accounts, unclear timelines, and emotional reactions created a sense of unresolved tension. Authorities conducted an investigation, but the conclusions offered little clarity. Over time, the tragedy became one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries, not because of sensationalism, but because no explanation fully accounted for the known details. The silence surrounding that night only deepened the public's sense of loss and uncertainty. Time, reflection, and re-examination. As years passed, Natalie Wood's death remained a subject of quiet unease rather than resolution. Renewed attention decades later prompted authorities to revisit earlier findings with a more cautious perspective. Advances in forensic understanding and new testimonies encouraged reassessment without rushing to conclusions. Importantly, officials acknowledged uncertainty instead of forcing closure. Her death certificate was updated to reflect undetermined circumstances, validating long-held concerns that the original explanation may have been incomplete. This shift marked a cultural change in how unresolved cases were approached, favoring transparency over finality. Public discussion returned, but with a more respectful tone, focused on accountability rather than accusation. Though no definitive answers emerged, the acknowledgement of uncertainty mattered deeply to those who had long questioned the narrative. Sometimes, recognition of complexity is the closest thing to truth. Fame, silence, and human fragility. Natalie Wood's story reveals how fame can complicate truth rather than illuminate it. In Hollywood, silence often becomes a form of protection, shaped by loyalty, fear, and the instinct to preserve reputations. Over time, fragmented accounts and withheld perspectives created a narrative that resisted resolution. This was not necessarily conspiracy, but the result of human hesitation within powerful systems. The lack of clarity left fans suspended between grief and doubt, unable to separate memory from mystery. Natalie became a symbol not only of talent lost too soon, but of how celebrity culture can obscure reality. Her story invites reflection on how society handles tragedy when the answers are uncomfortable. Rather than closure, what emerged was awareness of how fragile truth can be when filtered through fame, time, and silence. Remembering the artist, not the mystery. Today, Natalie Wood is remembered primarily for her extraordinary body of work, not the questions surrounding her death. Her performances continue to resonate because they were grounded in emotional honesty and vulnerability. She brought depth to every role, allowing audiences to see pieces of themselves reflected on screen. While the circumstances of her passing remain unresolved, her life tells a broader story about resilience and the cost of growing up in the spotlight. Natalie was not defined by tragedy, but by artistry, discipline, and emotional intelligence. As perspectives have matured, public focus has shifted away from speculation and toward empathy. Her legacy reminds us that behind every public figure is a human life deserving dignity. In the end, Natalie Wood's impact lives on through the films that still move audiences and the quiet strength she carried throughout her life. A legacy that endures. Natalie Wood's life remains a powerful reflection of Hollywood's beauty and its burdens. She navigated fame with grace, endured pressure with resilience, and sought authenticity in a world that rarely allowed it. Her journey speaks to the complexity of growing up under constant observation and the courage required to seek meaning beyond applause. While unanswered questions remain, they do not define her legacy. What endures is her contribution to cinema and the emotional truth she brought to her characters. Generations continue to discover her work, finding relevance in her performances decades later. Natalie Wood's story is not one of mystery alone, but of a woman who lived intensely, worked passionately, and left an indelible mark on film history. She is remembered not for how her life ended, but for how deeply it touched the world.